There is a person who knew you better than anyone ever will. They knew your first room, the exact weight of the light through the curtains in the afternoon, the face of the person who picked you up when you cried, the smell of the blanket you refused to sleep without. They knew your first steps, your first word, the first time you laughed so hard you couldn't breathe. They lived through thousands of days that were completely full, completely real, completely yours. And then they vanished. Not died, vanished, erased so cleanly that you can't even find the edges of where they used to be. That person was you, and you have no idea who they were. Think about that for a second. For the first years of your life, you were awake. You were learning faster than you ever would again. You were feeling everything at maximum volume, no filter, no armor. Something like 1,000 days of pure, raw experience, and almost none of it survived. If you try right now to remember your second birthday, your first Christmas, the first time you saw snow, you'll hit a wall. Not a blurry memory, a wall. Nothing. A blank where an entire human being used to live. We have a name for this. It's called infantile amnesia, and it is one of the strangest, most universal, most quietly disturbing facts about being human. Because this isn't a glitch that happens to a few unlucky people. It happens to everyone. Every single person you have ever met is walking around with the first chapter of their life torn out, and almost nobody stops to ask why. So let's ask, because the answer goes somewhere much darker and much more beautiful than you're expecting. This isn't a story about forgetting. It's a story about who has to die so that you can exist. Start with the wall itself. Where is it exactly? Researchers have been mapping this for over a century. The term infantile amnesia was coined by Sigmund Freud back in 1899. Freud got a lot of things wrong, but he noticed something real. He noticed that his patients, grown adults, could not access the years when arguably the most important events of their psychological lives took place. He found it so strange he built entire theories around it. But the hard numbers came much later. When scientists actually sat people down and asked them for their earliest memory, a pattern appeared with eerie consistency. For most adults, the first real memory lands somewhere around 3.5 years old. Before that, almost nothing. A few fragments maybe, a flash of a place, a feeling with no story attached. And here's the part that should bother you. A lot of those earliest memories aren't even real. They're reconstructions. Stories your family told you, photographs you saw, stitched together by your brain into something that feels like a memory, but was actually assembled after the fact. So the wall sits at about age 3. But here's where it gets stranger. The wall doesn't just sit there passively. It moves. It comes from memories you already had. There's a researcher named Carol Peterson at Memorial University of Newfoundland who has spent decades on this. She did something almost nobody thought to do. Instead of asking adults to reach back across the wall, she went to the other side of it. She asked young children, kids who were 3, 4, 5 years old, to tell her their earliest memories. And they could. They had them. Small children can absolutely tell you about things that happened when they were 2. The early years are not unrecorded. The child lived them and remembered them. Then she waited. She came back years later and asked the same children about those same memories, and they were gone. The kids who were now older had lost the very memories they'd described to her when they were small. They didn't just fail to form new early memories. The existing ones were being deleted in real time. A similar study out of Emory University, led by Patricia Bauer, followed this even more precisely. They recorded 3-year-olds talking with their mothers about recent events, real things that had happened. Then they tracked those same children over years. The kids tested at ages 5, 6, 7 still remembered a good chunk of it. But somewhere around age 7, the floor gave out. The children began forgetting those early events at an accelerating rate, until they landed at the same adult baseline as the rest of us. Scientists have a name for this moment. They call it the childhood amnesia offset. It's the exact point where your early life stops being something you can reach. Sit with what that actually means. When you were 5, you still remembered being 2. You could have told someone about it. That version of you had access to a whole world that is now sealed off from the person you are today. The memories didn't fade slowly like an old photograph left in the sun. They were there, intact, and then they were taken. Something reached in and pulled them out. So now we have a better question. Not, why didn't the memories form? They did form. The real question is, what is destroying them? What is the thing working quietly inside your own head that erased the first version of you? And this is where the story turns, because the culprit is not damage, it's not trauma, it's not neglect. The thing that erased your childhood is the exact same thing that was building your mind. The eraser and the architect are the same hand. To understand this, you need to meet a small structure buried deep in the center of your brain. It's called the hippocampus. It's shaped a little like a seahorse, which is actually what its name means in Greek, and it is the part of your brain most responsible for taking the raw chaos of experience and turning it into long-term memory. Without a hippocampus, you cannot form new, lasting memories at all. It's the machine that writes your life to disk. Now, for a long time, scientists believed something about the adult brain that turned out to be wrong. They believed you were born with all the brain cells you would ever have, and from there, it was a slow, one-way decline. Neurons dying, never replaced. But then, researchers discovered something that broke that rule. In one specific region of the hippocampus, a place called the dentate gyrus, the brain keeps making brand new neurons, fresh ones, throughout your entire life. The process is called neurogenesis. And here's the thing about a baby's brain. In the first years of life, that neurogenesis isn't a trickle, it's a flood. An infant's hippocampus is generating new neurons at a staggering, explosive rate, wiring itself up to handle a world it's encountering for the very first time. Your baby brain was the single most rapidly constructing object you will ever own. It was building itself faster than it ever would again. And that, it turns out, is the murder weapon. In 2014, a pair of researchers in Toronto, Paul Franklin and Sheena Jocelyn at the Hospital for Sick Children, published a study that reframed this entire mystery. Their idea was almost heretical at the time. They proposed that the explosive growth of new neurons, the very thing making the infant brain so powerful, was physically destroying the memories already stored there. Because memory isn't a thing sitting in a box. A memory is a specific pattern, a delicate circuit of connections between particular neurons. It's a shape. And when you flood that region with a torrent of new cells muscling their way in, forming new connections, rewiring the whole neighborhood, you don't just add capacity, you bulldoze the existing patterns. The new construction overwrites the old records. The circuit that held "the day I saw the ocean" gets dismantled to build the machinery that will let you understand what an ocean is. They tested it, and this is the part that gives me chills. They worked with baby mice, which naturally forget like human infants do, and with adult mice, which hold memories much longer. They took adult mice and artificially cranked up the neurogenesis in their hippocampus, pushing it back toward that infant-like flood of new neurons, and the adult mice started forgetting. Memories that should have been stable dissolved. They had induced infantile amnesia in a grown animal, on demand, just by turning the growth back up. Then they ran it the other way. They took infant animals and slowed the neurogenesis down, and the babies started holding on to memories they normally would have lost. They made a young brain remember by making it grow more slowly. There was one more detail, and it's the one I can't stop thinking about. In adult mice, one of the most reliable ways to boost neurogenesis is exercise, running. Put a mouse on a running wheel, and its brain starts pumping out new neurons. And in these experiments, the mice that ran more, the mice building the most new brain, forgot faster. The healthier and more active the brain, the more aggressively it erased itself. Forgetting wasn't the brain failing. Forgetting was the brain thriving. So let's name the villain properly, because it's not what you thought. There is no villain. That's what makes it so unsettling. The thing that erased your first years wasn't an enemy. It was you, growing. It was the raw, relentless machinery of becoming a person. Every new neuron that carried away a memory of your mother's face was a neuron you needed to eventually recognize faces at all. You paid for your future mind with your infant memories, and you had no say in the transaction. The bill came due before you could even speak. Which brings us to the second layer of this, because neurogenesis is only half the story. The other half is even more human. To remember a moment as part of your life, you need something a baby simply doesn't have yet. You need a you for it to happen to. Think about how your memories actually feel. When you remember a real event, it's not just facts. It's a scene starring yourself. I was there. This happened to me. I felt this. That sense of a continuous main character, a self that persists from yesterday into today into tomorrow, is not something you're born with. It gets built, slowly, over the first years of life. Psychologists call it the autobiographical self, and it doesn't fully come online until somewhere around age 2 to 4. A newborn doesn't experience the world as happening to a stable me. There is experience, but there's no narrator yet, and a story with no narrator is very hard to save. Language is tangled up in this too. A researcher named Catherine Nelson showed how much of our early memory depends on learning to talk about the past, usually with a parent. Remember when we went to the beach? Remember the big dog? That back and forth, that narrating out loud, is how a child learns to package experience into stories that can be filed away and retrieved later. Before you had words, you had no filing system. The experiences were happening. They just had no handles to grab them by. You can't retrieve a memory you never had the language to shelve. And here's a haunting piece of evidence for how deep this goes. There's a psychologist named Chi Wang at Cornell who compared the earliest memories of adults across cultures. She found that adults raised in cultures that emphasize personal narrative and individual experience tend to have earlier first memories than adults raised in cultures that emphasize the group over the self. Let that land. The location of your wall, the exact border of your own forgetting, was shaped in part by the language spoken around your crib and the stories your family did or didn't tell about you. Your amnesia was partly written by your culture before you could object. So now stack it all up, because this is the full machine. In your first years, 3 forces were working at once. Your hippocampus was flooding itself with new neurons, physically overwriting whatever it stored. You had no stable sense of self to anchor the memories to, and you had no language to file them for later retrieval. 3 separate systems, none of them broken, all of them doing exactly what they were supposed to do, and the combined result was the total, silent erasure of the person you used to be. Let me take you into one moment. Picture it. A small child, maybe 2 years old, standing at a window during a thunderstorm. The sky goes white, the glass shakes, and this child is not scared because they don't have the concept of danger yet. They're delighted. Pure, uncut wonder, the kind you will spend the rest of your adult life chasing and never quite feel again. That child turns around, face lit up, to share it with someone. That instant is as real and as full as any moment you will ever live, and it is already dissolving. Even as it happens, the neurons holding it are being crowded out by newer ones. Within a few years, it will be completely, permanently gone. Not stored somewhere deep, not locked in a vault you might one day open under hypnosis. Gone the way a sandcastle is gone. The child at the window will never be remembered by the adult they become. You will carry that person's genes, their scars, their fears, everything except the one thing that would let you actually know them, their memories. And here's the part I need you to really understand, because this is where the fear turns into something else. This erasure is not a tragedy, it's the price of the miracle. That flood of neurons that took your childhood is the exact same flood that gave you the ability to learn language, to recognize the people you love, to build a self that could last a lifetime. If your infant brain had held on to everything, if it had refused to overwrite, you would not be smarter, you would be trapped. There are extremely rare people who cannot forget, who retain almost everything, and they don't describe it as a superpower, they describe it as drowning, unable to move forward because the past never recedes. A mind that keeps everything is a mind that can't grow. Forgetting is not the opposite of a healthy brain. Forgetting is what a healthy brain does to become itself. So the first version of you had to be erased so that you could exist at all. That child at the window was not lost. That child was the raw material. They were dismantled, cell by cell, and used to build the very mind that is listening to these words right now. You are standing on the erased body of who you were. You always have been. And this changes something about how you see the blank. Because the blank was never empty. It's full. It's the most crowded, most important, most formative stretch of your entire life. It's just written in a language your current brain can no longer read, because your current brain is what replaced it. So the next time you look at a photograph of yourself as a small child and feel that strange distance, that sense of looking at a stranger who happens to wear your name, Understand what you're actually seeing. You're not looking at your past, you're looking at your foundation. At the person who lived 1,000 days you'll never get back, felt everything without armor, and then quietly gave up every single memory so that you could have a mind at all. They asked for nothing. They don't even know they're gone. And you will never be able to thank them. But they're still here. In the way you flinch at a certain sound, in the food that comforts you for no reason you can name, in the shape of who you turned out to be. The first, you didn't disappear. The first, you became you. And the fact that you can't remember them might be the most generous thing your own mind has ever done.